Yo, what is up? And welcome back to another Sit Down with Skriv. Got some surprises for you today. The first is that the guest is TeaTime. Might not be a massive surprise, because his face is on the thumbnail. But all the same, good friend of mine, and feeling really good about these. This one, because of that friendship, that establishment over a good year and a half, 2 years, it's probably coming up to at this point, that we've been working on and off with each other, there's a lot more rapport. So I felt much more comfortable getting in there, giving my own opinions. Also, a lot of the topics that we talk about, I would say are more relatable than usual kind of thing. So I wanted to have a bit more to say with this one, and I really did. I think that shines through. There's some cool topics towards the end. We really have a lot that we're able to talk about. That's not just debate, not just debate to get you to watch to the end. But all the same, a lot of fun, bit more podcasty in energy. Of course, always let me know how you feel about that kind of thing. It's also a bit longer, so maybe this is something that I will play around with. Maybe this is something that people are not going to be as big of a fan of as per usual. The second surprise is this. What? Right? I got some graphics done. You probably noticed the intro. And we got this. And a few others. Keep your eyes peeled throughout the video for some more cool graphics. I didn't do them myself, though. I had a good friend, Matty, who's a big supporter. I know he's going to be watching. I'll just drop the name, so that he knows I appreciate the work that he's done. They're brilliant, easy to use, because I am still getting there with that kind of thing, but all the same, a hell of a lot of fun. But yeah, as always, drop those comments. Let me know what you're thinking with the slight change in energy, in vibe, etc., etc. Always appreciate that support and that feedback. And remember, I told you there was more. Either way, let's get into the interview. Welcome, everybody, to another Sit Down. Today, I'm going to be joined by TeaTime, a good friend of mine, someone that I've worked with quite a bit over the years, as well on MDL and everything. Maybe that's a section that we'll get into, but I just wanted to kick straight off from the beginning, TeaTime, with maybe a brief history of how you managed to get to where you are now with your casting career. Where did you start? What are some of the things that maybe you did before you transitioned into casting, and just that general history of your casting career?
I started off trying to go pro in Dota first. This was back in 2013 or so. I tried to be a pro player from Pakistan. This was not really much of a thing, and I was not very good at the game or at any other game, which was something I came to understand later on, which is that my mechanics in any game that I've ever played have not been stellar. So I never even managed to get past 4K in Dota MMR back in the days when, top 200 was maybe 5,600 entry point. Skriv, I know you don't play Dota, so just don't worry about it. But anyhow, so I tried doing that. Eventually, I stumbled across a local tournament series, because one thing about me was I was very adamant to never get into the local scene, just because of some really weird sense of, hey, these guys don't do things properly, because in the local scene, the Dota players, even the very, very, very insanely talented ones, they never actually were willing to compete in the difficult leagues and in international tournaments, because it was very similar to the UKCS scene, from what I understand, which is that the best players would just do fuck all outside of national tournaments. So I just happened to get into it, and a guy called The Prodigy asked me, hey, dude, do you want to cast this game with me just for fun? And I said, yes, that sounds like it'll be interesting. I've seen Toby One cast a couple of times, and I jumped into it. We casted for a while. He was really, really good. I was really, really bad. And I hate being bad in life in general. I just hate being bad. So I started working on a lot. And fast forward a year and a half, 2 years down the line, I thought I was really good at Dota 2 casting. In hindsight, I probably wasn't, but at least that's what I thought at the time. Fast forward a little bit more, and ESL on their multi-channel network partnership system wanted to have someone from Pakistan. Don't really know why, because they never did any Pakistani activation or anything like that, but they wanted someone. So I said, hey, I'm more than happy to come on board. I misunderstood and I thought it was a casting contract, because I was like, what, 18 or something, and I didn't understand contracts very well. Maybe 19 actually. But I came on board, and then they said to me, no, actually, you can't cast Dota with us. All of our casting is handled by Join Dota or Freaks for You, which at the time was, people like Capitalists, Toby, a couple other casters who were really, really good. So there was no way I was going to be able to compete with them to get like even tier 2 gigs. They asked me, hey, do you want to do Counter-Strike? And there I got into CS because I played a little bit. I was a solid Gold Nova 1 before the rank update. So I'm just saying, in today's terms, if you guys are watching, it's like a silver 2.5. And I said, yeah, sure. What's the worst that could happen? A lot of things. A lot of really bad things happen. But we don't talk about those till later in the interview, I'm sure. So that's kind of where I got to over here. In the middle of it all and before it all, I was also doing some theater. Debating has been a big part of my life as well. I competed competitively. Last year, I formally retired from debating as well at the end of 2019. But I am very proud that I still managed to be like I went to the World Championships and I was one of the best over there. So it was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. That was really fun.
Very quickly on that, then I suppose what is like a skill or a few skills that maybe you've used from your experience with debating in I suppose casting. It could also move into working in esports in general. Maybe it's given you like a leg up in negotiations. I don't know.
Oh, definitely. So not negotiations, but in esports in general, plus in casting, debating's been a huge part of me, which is that because debates is it's honestly just, it's a sport. It's all about finding logical gaps and finding the thread of logic you want to follow. And that's really helped me with analysis and coaching, which is, I also did some coaching and I'm still doing some coaching occasionally. It really helps you understand where like middle grounds are, where someone's wrong in their logic and how to explain it to them. And beyond that, it really helps you understand, because debating is all about the theoretical, logical supremacy. You're not supposed to be right practically. You're supposed to be right in theory. And this, combined with me watching a lot of League of Legends streamers, despite not knowing anything about League, in particular, one of them was LS. And LS always talked about something which was very close to my heart because of a combination of my debating and my general philosophy in life, is that you try to do the best thing possible in the game, even if it's not possible for you, assuming that you are mechanically gifted enough to do so. So debating helped me conceptualize that to a point where I can communicate my analysis much more effectively during casting. So even before I'd kind of leveled up my game knowledge, which happened in 2020, even before that, I could at least model the game in a way where I could try to provide some interesting tidbits of analysis wherever it was possible.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, isn't it, how you can draw these other things. You briefly mentioned theatre and things like that. That's something that I did quite a lot before starting as a caster, and I find that that's really helped me with like just the confidence and a lot of the same rules of like projection and timing, knowing when to step in and things like that, and doing a little bit of improv as well helps a great deal. So it is certainly interesting how these different things can cross over. I did want to get into the coaching side of things as well.
Sure.
I know that you've worked. It was within that Pakistani region, right? And for the
Middle Eastern, not Pakistani. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. My bad. But
No
for a
worries.
Pakistani team, right? I believe.
No. It was an
okay.
it was an Arabic team with a Pakistani player in there. It was
Right,
the first
okay.
Middle Eastern team to ever make an Asian minor.
Yeah, so in these RMR events that you took place in, like, what were some of the experiences and some of maybe the difficulties of coaching that you didn't know before you got into it? Some of the challenges that you had to overcome.
I think the biggest challenge is, well, for one thing, it wasn't an English-speaking team. It was an Arabic-speaking team. Hint, hint, I don't speak Arabic. So 4 players were from the Middle East and like Dubai and various areas around it, and one of the players was from Pakistan, who Pokemon, terrible name, great player, but they were really bad at communication because of the language barriers predominantly, but then also because there's no one to look up to, honestly speaking, in the Middle East. In Asia, there's still always Tyloo, there's still always Vichy. If you're a younger Asian team, you can say, hey, we can try to compete with them, we can try to beat them, we can try to get on that level in that way. Over here, it was also more like there's this hope, there's this feeling of desperation which is that everyone on some level, even if they don't want to, they think that we can't succeed because of structural reasons. So it's easier to back out and run away from it. So my role as a coach was honestly more than anything else making sure that the team doesn't fall apart twice a week and making sure that we keep practicing and everything. One thing I will say is that I was incredibly blessed to have Ejram as the in-game leader. Ejram's a guy who has on LAN like fucking dominated Shocks and Kenny S. At the PLG LAN that happened a while ago. I'm sure people remember it being an absolute catastrophe of a tournament, which I'm sure adds to it. But Ejram was insane, and Ejram as an in-game leader was so good that I genuinely think he could be the in-game leader for a top 20 European team, maybe even top 15. The only issue is Ejram had incredible anger management issues. So for him to get his point across to these incredibly young kids, because he was 26 and everyone else was like 18 or 20. So it was very difficult for the rest of the team to not psychologically kind of break down underneath Edram's leadership, which is why they ended up removing Edram as well. And then they realized they were nothing without him because of how brilliant he was as an in-game leader and as a player. He was genuinely tactically one of the best minds I've ever actually talked to about the game. So combining all of that made it a different challenge to what I thought it would be initially. But funnily enough, I was better suited to that challenge than, the time when I coached a North American team where they just sorry, Adnan, if you're watching this, but they just weren't, they didn't have a tactical understanding of the game at all. And that's not what my specialty was back then. I would say I'm much better at it now because over 2020, I made it a point to become to increase my ability to analyze much more while I was at home. But the thing about Edgeram's team was I just had to make sure that middle grounds could be reached, communication statuses could be established, people knew what to call at what times, people really understood what Edgeram's vision was, and I was more the mediator between emotions and players and everything. And beyond that, the place where I added value was saying, okay, you're already a great player, but this is one area you're fucking up in, and this is how you can logically play it better. And this is where debating actually helped me a lot, which is that I could explain to them that logically this position is better because of X, X, and X reasons. And although you're pointing out that this is what you think is good, it doesn't actually work on this particular level because of X, X, and X reasons. So that was where my skill set was actually surprisingly much better because of the challenges that I hadn't expected compared to if this was just a team with zero tactics.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like how getting in on the coaching, getting within a team gives you a much better perspective, I suppose, on things and how to function within a team. And then obviously, like you're saying, you can draw, like you're alluding to, you can draw some of that into your casting. So moving on to the casting itself, and I suppose to draw a parallel with what you've been saying about quite heavily improving your game knowledge on a deeper level. Typically speaking, I would call you a play-by-play. I think that's not
absolutely
kind of
100%.
controversial, right? But how important do you think it is for play-by-plays to actually have some of that deeper knowledge? Because obviously it is, with some of them, a little bit of a meme, like you say, that they're all golden over and everything, and maybe that therefore reflects some of the more hands-on knowledge, right? They have all the knowledge of the teams, who's strong and all that kind of stuff, but the more hands-on knowledge is maybe not there. So what is it that drove you to want to really, really lift your knowledge of the game on that deeper level?
I think that's an excellent question, by the way, Skriv. I'm very happy to hear that because I have no idea how to answer it, so I'm delaying. But no, actually, in all fairness, I think it really depends on what kind of play-by-play do you want to be. And I started, I kind of reached a point in early 2020 where I said, okay, I think I'm a pretty fucking good play-by-play caster, but I'm like generic. So there's no difference between me and Skriv and me and Keith LaFortune, formerly known as Seaside. There's no real difference between me and Dinko. Like, what's the difference? So I started to think of who I want to be more than anything else. And I sort of understood that I would like to be able to be excited about smaller things. I don't want to be just the guy who's always hyping up play-by-play, because the fact of the matter is I'm sometimes casting tier 2. And, it's not as exciting as watching tier 1 all the time. So I need more things to be excited about. So The nice thing about tier 2 is there's always a lot of different unique innovations because they don't follow the meta as closely, because they understand that they don't have the skill ceiling yet to actually play like Astralis or FaZe or any of these people. So they kind of have to figure out their own style, and they're in the process of doing that. And in that process, where it's not the highest of high levels, I'm actually pretty good at, getting excited about smaller things, which helps me keep energy up for a game, and it helps me provide more interesting things to talk about, especially because now the point is my analysts can talk more. And one thing I'll say is I've been very blessed to have great analysts in my duos. I worked with Maui Snake for about a year and a half. Now I'm working with Michael, Yumi Cassidy. These two guys are really good at playing off of things I say. And I'm at a point where, honestly, I do think I could do a color role pretty well, but I wouldn't want to, because I still know my best fit is as a play-by-play, facilitating color at that particular time and then switching into hype when I need to. So for me, it was more about, okay, how can I be the best duo as well? Because the other thing is also, Skriv, quite frankly, you know this just as well as I do. Sometimes you've got to cast with a play-by-play. Like when I cast with you now, I for MDL, I do default more to analysis. When I cast with Wolfie for MDL, I'm a pure color caster. I don't do any play-by-play because Wolfie is, all due respect to him, he's a great play-by-play, but he's a little bit newer in the casting game as well. So I don't ever know if he's going to be comfortable working with me, because we haven't done that much work together. So it's also about being the best possible duo you can be. And finally, honestly, it just helped me develop more of a love for the game than I had before, and I really liked it. But when now I'm like, oh shit, look at that tactic, look at how the minimap movement was like a trade of this zone versus this zone with this one, with this one small flash or one small smoke, and that makes me excited. I try not to talk about it, which makes me laugh, because every time someone tells me, oh, this guy doesn't know how to do analysis, like I just want my co-caster to do it because they're better at it, frankly speaking. Like their word economy is better. And I'm sorry, Skriv, I'm taking a while to answer this, but the one last reason why I don't want to do color is because I'm not a native English speaker, which is actually a pretty big hindrance to explaining concepts in a shorter amount of time. So when I'm like working on explaining something cool, I do it in more words than Michael or Maui would do. So it's better for them to do that, but I can still bring the hype, and I can still bring all of the, oh my god, he's killing it, but I can also be hyped about the right things then. So it's this really nice combination that I've started to gravitate towards, and that's really helped me step up my casting game personally.
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be a bit more of a shift, right, where we are starting to see a few more like hard colors, as it were, come up from our kind of level. It was, sort of in the beginning, you had your ex players like Henry and Moses and whatnot, who then also had to learn how to play by play to a certain extent, yes. Right? But when I first started, I would say most of the people that were casting at my kind of level were mostly play by play. You could say someone like Hawker is certainly an analytical and a color type, but then still had to fill
in the beginning. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Because it's just the way that the flow works back and forth. So I think having
you have to solo cast in the beginning too. That's also
well, yeah, there is that. I suppose and that's become less common, right? Yeah. Just because there's way more people. I and I'm sure you would be on for paid work that was solo casted. Which just seems very wacky in today's day and age to see that, honestly. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you perhaps some of you've touched on a few different names that you've worked with, but perhaps some of the casters that you learn from the most. Maybe they are at your kind of level, or maybe they're some of the bigger names that you're yet to work with.
Maui has defined my concept of the game. Maui Snake has single-handedly created my philosophy on Counter-Strike pretty much. And sure, it's evolved from there, but if anyone ever asked me, I am a student of the Alex Eldenberg school of thought like through and through. Absolutely. And sure, there's been other people like I've consumed every single video that Thorin has ever made, which makes me sound like an absolute stan, but I just find it very interesting the way he talks about certain things. And I sometimes don't even give a shit about the content. It's just I want to know how he models so I can do that if I ever want to do a desk. Because one thing I will say I really like doing, I like doing desk work. That's very different because I get time to compose and I get past the native English barrier. That really helps me. Um, so I think analytically those two. But then as far as play by play is concerned, I think Pansy's been kind of my biggest inspiration from forever. Because of something really weird, and I don't even know how to explain this, which is other than the fact that she's really good, but a lot of people are really good. The thing was, I never thought I could compete with Semler. I just didn't. Back when Semler was like considered the GOAT. Obviously now there's been a lot more influx into the talent pool, so obviously people have more mixed opinions on it. I still think he's a great caster, but back then it was inconceivable. And then for Sadikist, because he was then considered the absolute best, and I'm a super fucking competitive person, I was always just in my heart of hearts, I was like, I've got to beat this guy. So I can't, sure, I learned from, and I will do it begrudgingly,
Yeah.
So for me, it was kind of like that. And then it was like, okay, well, there's only so much you can learn from someone, in my opinion, if you're doing it begrudgingly. So then I was like, okay, who do I go towards? And it was Pansy, who I learned a lot from watching how she does things, from watching her style and everything. Then other than that, I was also I tried to learn a little bit from Bardolph's comedic timing and his the way he says certain things, because I liked his analogies, and I didn't like them in the sense that I got them because half the time they was talking about shit I didn't know about, but I liked when he brought them in, and I liked his tone of voice. So I tried to combine that with my stand-up comedy experience to kind of supplement a bad games casting as well. So I think those would be my chief inspirations. And Michael's helped me improve a lot. So Michael, my current co-caster, Michael, again, sorry if I'm saying you're not an inspiration to me, but it's been a few months, man. Okay.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Give it time.
But yeah, I suppose on that point, what are maybe some of the things about them that you find so effective? What makes them, good commentators that you and others should indeed look up to and learn from?
Maui's just really smart about the game, honestly. It's not even funny. It's unfair. It's also ridiculous that he wasn't like, there should have been no way in the world that I was duoing with Maui Snake for a year and a half. That's like me duoing with Henry G for a year and a half. Okay, that's how good Maui should be. But maybe not Henry, but hyperbole. So the fact that he knew that much about the game, he had professional experience, well, semi-pro, but almost professional experience as well. He's scrimmed against people like EG and whatnot in his team, so I'd count that as a big, massive W. He's really good at articulation. He's actually very educated, so in case people don't know, I think he's got he's done a degree in economics, statistics, and philosophy, or something like that, from an Ivy League. So
well, he mentioned when he was on my interview earlier. I think he did economics for a year, dropped that, and then moved on to statistics and philosophy at Columbia University.
Yeah, it's Columbia. Yeah. So it's he's really good at articulating. And then the other thing was, we also got along fairly well, I'd like to say, in the sense that we both really like talking about food and books and different differences in our cultures and all of that stuff. And he was really someone I really got along with, and he was very happy to explain stuff to me that I just didn't understand. So like, he took time out, because we were co-casting a lot, so it also makes sense technically, is that he took time out to take me through Overpass for an hour and just be like, okay, this is kind of how map rotations work, this is how this works, because Overpass is a tricky map to cast for me. Coming from someone who hasn't played a lot, which, by the way, until 2020, I'd basically not played the game because I just watched it all the time.
Yeah.
So it was really helpful for me to have Maui on my side in that regards. And the other thing about Maui was he knew he was really good, so he didn't have to really care about other people in the industry as much. So he didn't like network. So I could also be very free in what I'm talking about with him about other casters and stuff like that, where I can bounce ideas off of him about their casting, which made me understand a lot more the grievances that people have with casting on a higher level. And he was kind of explaining that to me as well. So Maui was really, really big for me because of that. The reason why Pansy was so good was because Pansy was someone who was, I think she has literally the best pacing in the world, from any caster. Actually, I don't think there's a caster in the world who's better than her at pacing. Sadicus was very, 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 very good, of course, but I actually think Pansy might be the best, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is she knows exactly when to ramp up. She knows exactly how to work her high highs. And that is one thing where my voice naturally lends itself to a higher note when I'm hyped, because I still make this mistake sometimes of closing off my vocal cords. And that makes my note slightly higher. So then it was either I figure out how to stop an instinct that's been there all my life, or I try to work with that. So I try to do a bit of both. And Pansy works the best with high notes, because Sadicus as well, when he goes, like the Sadicus, iconic call would be like, oh, very open vocal cords. Pansy, obviously, she's also a woman. So obviously, there are differences in vocal patterns. So her high notes were much better. So whenever she got super hype, that worked really well for me. And how she manipulated those in when she's joking, all that stuff, I tried really hard to kind of learn from that. Not mimic it, because obviously different vocal patterns, but learn from that, yeah. Who else did I mention? I forgot.
Semler was in there as well, I believe.
Yeah, no, Semler was just gold status for me. I couldn't even think of learning from him, honestly speaking. It was more just the other thing with Pansy was back when I was casting, she was still seen as tier 2. She wasn't seen as the premium talent. She was kind of in the zone where I guess Tombiz is now, but maybe closer to Vince. And people are still pissed off when she got semifinals, which at the time was sort of rightfully so, I would say, because she did obviously improve, and I'm not saying she was bad then, but maybe semifinals of a major wasn't really her thing. But my point is that she was much more kind of mentally approachable. I've never talked to her, but mentally I was like, okay, this is someone I can learn more from them. And this is a philosophy I've had in my coaching and my casting and everything. If you are not tier 2, do not try to learn from tier 1 beyond just basics. If you are tier 3, try to learn from tier 2. If you're tier 4, try to learn from tier 2.5 and tier 2. That now that I think I'm formally tier 2, I try to learn from tier 1, but even now, it's like my philosophy of improving in casting, it's kind of gotten to a point where, sure, I listen to other people for ideas, but now it's more just like I'm conceptualizing my own model of how to become tier 1.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something, because I feel to break into tier 2 solidly, you perhaps need to get the dream hack under the belt, which I've not had yet.
You're tier 2, mate.
Oh, okay.
Hey,
well, there you go. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
No, because the thing is, you've done other events as well, like the Eden Arena ones and stuff like that. You're definitely tier 2, and skill-wise, you're very, very good. So yeah,
I appreciate that. I very much appreciate that. But
no worries.
Yeah, the issue I think is kind of once you get to that level, you need to start to form your own style, right?
Yeah.
And
definitely.
Notice things that other casters do. I'd say by that point, maybe if you're more color and analysis based, perhaps you don't have as much of the play-by-play fundamentals down in a sense. But when you get to that point, I would say as a play-by-play, you have the fundamentals. You know the very basic things that you do and do not do.
Yep.
But I've started to notice something this year that I tried to do a bit more of is sort of talking around the situation, right? Where a lot of casters at this level can get into the habit of being sort of overly descriptive.
Yeah.
And it is kind of
always talking about around for no reason, yeah.
Right. And it is say what you see kind of thing, but then there's also a lot of the top tier casters will have a raw reaction, or when the third kill of the 4K comes in, their intonation and everything and whatnot will go up, but it's they'll keep. That's when the line comes out. You know what I mean? Stop blowing my mind, or whatever it is. So I think it's kind of interesting to notice that from the top level, and then there's people like Semler and Harry. I think do it really well, where you can tell they're constantly casting with like a smile on their face. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
Semler has this really good childlike glee about plays. You know that
him and Harry actually have that. Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's kind of interesting how, big changes probably happen in your first kind of 12 months, and then beyond that point, it's about just noticing other things and kind of trying to put your own spin on it, because it's, I'm not gonna go and say, oh well, I really like the way that Harry casts, let me just kind of plagiarize like his style and everything. So I think it's
I mean, honestly, you I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's cool,
Skriv, but it's like, yes, to some extent, but at the same time, dude, if you're trying to copy Harry, you just like, you should do it. Frankly speaking, in my opinion, you should just steal it, because the point is you're not going to be good enough, and then you'll have to figure out a way to be good enough. And honestly, if you're tier 3, or I hate saying tiers for casters.
Yeah, it is a bit.
I don't even know if I am tier 2. It's just easier to say. But like, if you're sort of at the level where honestly, I still think I've got a foot in either side. So if you're still at the level where like you're not really doing anything big in terms of, you're not quite at the consistent A tier events yet, which I'm definitely not, by the way, I will add that, is that you're perfectly fine copying, because you're not going to do it well enough. You're going to figure that out. You're going to try to learn from it, assuming that you are actually introspective enough. You're going to try to learn from it, and eventually you'll figure out your own take on it. So that's like, I would say it's similar to how you want to build a team up initially. Is if you have a 5-man roster, just steal a lot of strats if you have to. Just take as many strats as you can, and then you'll figure out, okay, this sort of works for my roster, this sort of doesn't work for my roster in the first 2-3 weeks, and then you're building on that, and eventually 4 months down the line, 6 months down the line, your team's got a completely different strat book. But the point is, you started off with the fundamental philosophy of one. I'd say it's similar to that in my head.
Yeah, I can agree with that, actually. I can agree with that. I think that's completely fair. And it's like, early on, you're probably going to have comparisons drawn. Like I got a fair amount, maybe when I worked with or talked to some higher up talent from where I was at, not necessarily like, the objectively right at the top. I got like comparisons to Vince at the time and whatnot, right? And I think at one point someone mentioned Joe Miller, which obviously you need to be watching CS for a long time. Yeah,
all League of Legends. I mean,
well,
that works too. Because I watch a lot of their League casting, even though again I hate League. I don't even know why I do this to myself. I just really like Monty.
I think, well, yeah, I think with League it was like one of the first broadcasts to really like centralize and strengthen that. You know what I mean? Like they had very, very, very solid quality and commentators, and it was I suppose like their sort of full-time jobs. I think
yes.
I was watching a podcast somewhere where it was like Monty and Papa Smithy were on and whatnot, and when Monty started working in the LCK or OGN or whatever it was named at the time, it was like a solid 40 to 50 hour week of maybe 30 hours of that was like casting, and then the rest of it was doing research on the teams and all that kind of stuff. So which even to the busiest people, Machines and Sponge and whatnot of the scene in CS, those kinds of hours are pretty crazy within a week, In
all fairness, maybe not this year, considering.
Well, yeah, that's very true. Actually, not much rotation.
But no, absolutely. Look, the thing about League, which I love to this day, I do not care about the gameplay at all. I will watch all of the shows. I will watch. I watch all the Summoning Insights. I will watch all of the Crackdowns. I watch all of the like LS and I Will Dominate shows. I don't even care about the game, man. It's just fun. Honestly, it's just fun to listen to how they talk about people. The great thing about League is one thing they've done really well is they've codified terminology really well. This is something I'm personally working on as well, because I don't think we have that enough in CS. Like freezing lanes and working off of that stuff. So, this codification is really, really well done in League, and a lot of that comes down to LS and Monte Cristo, in my opinion. And Monty is actually, I didn't mention him earlier because he's not from CS. Monty is someone who I've also really, really, really tried to learn from as a caster and as a broadcast person too. So, yeah, that's a tangent on League right there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's where like I got started in watching esports and where my interest was, and the not like the moment or whatever, but from watching a fair amount of League in like 2013, 2014, I kind of decided that I wanted to try my hand at esports commentary and try and go into that.
Cool.
But I think it was like, CS was a lot easier, I've felt,
You
to get
did some
into.
UK, but didn't you do some like of the casting for the UK League?
Yeah, last year in like a bit of downtime around spring.
How'd
One
that
of
go?
them. It's difficult, man. It's very very difficult, and I think it was good, and I definitely improved. One was for like the university scene, the Newell, which was really good to be involved with because they were very very hands on. Right, we had to do all our research on the teams, talk to captains, this that and the other. The lead league broadcast guy, manager, I guess. He gave like pointers, and then we had to do VOD reviews on each other as well, to try and spread like some of the philosophy. And I was very very new to League, but it definitely gave me a lot of like finding energy very very quickly, which I think is something that you need to do in CS quite a bit. And then I think the peaks in like team fights and whatnot in League.
Oh, it's so much fun, dude. Holy,
I
miss that about Dota casting.
Yeah, it scales so clearly,
yeah.
and I think you have to have like a lot more control. And then as well, really helped me with talking faster. You know what I mean? Because you have to get so much information in such a short space of time when you do the play-by-play side of things. And then also finding like flow in some of the downtime moments, because obviously in MOBAs it's very
much more downtime,
long peaks and long troughs, whereas in CS the break, even in your eco rounds and stuff, they can last long, but most of the time it's not taking up any longer than like 3 minutes, which you can split with someone else. But in MOBAs
really
it's harder to do that.
That's really interesting because for me, it was because I came from Dota first and then into Counter-Strike casting. I found the round system really hard to work. And I've, even to this date, I personally think that the round system is harder because maintaining tempo and maintaining rhythm across a manual reset is much more difficult compared to, for me, what was way easier back in the day was it's a 60-minute game. I know my floor is supposed to rise, and like this is, if this is what it is in the beginning, this is what it's supposed to be. And because of that deliberation that I know is internally present, it let me have a lot more freedom in my vocal range. And for me to switch over to round based, it was like this hard reset that comes in every time. And sure, and in CS as well, technically as the game goes on, you're supposed to be more excited, but that's not how it works per se. I don't know how to properly articulate it, but I just don't think it's the same thing. That hard reset at the end of a round is very, very difficult to like bring your emotional highs down from as well sometimes, and know how to work off of it. Like one thing where I had the privilege of being there while Maniac was getting his first ever casting done earlier this week at Home Sweet Home. Maniac himself admitted he was bad at this, which was that he did not know how to come down off of a high, because this epic play happens. Surson gets like an insane 4K with a scout. How do you cast the next 3 rounds? Your mind's been blown. That process and a lot of other things made the round base makes me think even to date that the round based system is actually harder and needs more technical skill to cast than extended MOBA. But that's also personal biases because I just like Counter-Strike more now. So there's that.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting conversation to have about that and like the flows of energy. I think in your MOBAs, it's sort of, team fights tend to just keep scaling and whatnot, but then I think afterwards you bring it down, it like plateaus a little bit while maybe a replay comes up, that kind of thing, and then you bring it down again, and it's much more telegraphed, I suppose, in that sense. Whereas in CS, it really depends. There is
Yeah.
like, your hard stop or whatever rather than a gradual thing. But then if they're moving into like an eco round in the next round, you can probably keep it going. But if it's another really highly important round in your, 14-11 situation, like you can't really dwell on the previous round all that much.
Yes. Yeah.
But then for me, when it comes to casting, I think when you're casting the action, as it were, the big moments, I think CS is, from what I've seen and what I've worked on, like I feel it is the best, just because
It's
you
so much fun.
have way more control. I think where you can change your timing up a little bit. You can build tension within moments that are already quite exciting, because there's a couple little moments where perhaps players are waiting for the retake to get going or whatever. Whereas again in your MOBAs, it's like you team fight and then it just keeps on going. There might be a little bit of a break while they're chasing after the team that's already like lost the fight or whatever, but generally speaking, it all happens at once.
So I get where you're coming from, but I will say there's something really, really special in my heart, because I still do some Dota casting locally for Pakistan tournaments sometimes. So like, whenever there's a big national Pakistan tournament, because there's no other Dota casters who can sort of compare. I just do the casting for fun because I love all the players. I know all the players. I was in the scene. It's kind of like a part of who I am. It's like when you watch Messi. You know the guy. You kind of so just multiply that by 10. So I will say it's so much fun to do play-by-play for a 3-minute long team fight. Like, it's so much fun. It is genuinely one of the most joyous things you could possibly have as a play-by-play for me personally. Oh, he's come back. He's respawned again. Like, it happens very rarely in Dota as well, but it's fun. Put it that way. And I think Dota team fights are probably a little bit more fun than League, in my opinion, because League team fights, it's like, I don't know. I don't know much about the game, so I'll give that disclaimer that I might just be wrong blatantly. But Dota teamfight, there is every single spell is just so overpowered in Dota that everything is a game changer. Everything is a game changer. So there's so many things to keep an eye out for that can bring it around in a very, very close match at least. But yeah. Anyhow, that's enough about MOBAs, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm similar boat to you, where I know hardly anything about Dota, so
Makes sense.
It's fair enough that like maybe our information on MOBAs and when I play League's probably my most played game, and I'm not that great. So it's a difficult one to play, but we'll not get into that too much, because we'll probably be here all day complaining about the hardships of solo queue. I wanted to move on to, obviously this year you got quite a big milestone when it comes to being a commentator in Counter-Strike, and you managed to break into the DreamHacks, not one but two. If I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
What are some of the kind of difficulties of getting on that? Now, I'm not asking you to tell me the secret or whatever, but perhaps just some of the things, not necessarily with DreamHack, I guess, but some of the hardships of working within the esports industry and trying to move up the rungs of the ladder, as it were, as a commentator.
Honestly, Skriv, the thing is, my answer will be very different to anyone else, to be honest, because the reality is, and I'll give a disclaimer, I absolutely love my country. I genuinely do. I love living here. I love the cultures, most of them, some of them at least. I love the traditions. I love a lot of things about it, but Pakistan is not the place to be where you want to, like, if you want to get into esports, which is that I firmly believe to this date that if I lived in Europe, for example, I would have been here 2 years ago. And maybe not 2 years ago, a year ago at least, though. And this is for a lot of different reasons, which is, for one thing, dude, I cannot tell you how many co-casters I've pissed off because I say something which they're not comfortable with, because I just don't know they're not comfortable with. And I know you've experienced this with me too. The only thing was you don't get pissed off, but you were just like, maybe not say that, dude. No, and That combined with how hard networking is, I can't go to events. Going to events costs me thousands and thousands of dollars. Then there's other things, which is that the kind of content and stuff that I wanted to do, it was much harder for me. So, for example, I wanted to do interviews. For me to do interviews, I've saved up so much money to be able to go there. Beyond that, it's like equipment is so expensive for me to buy. Like, I casted and produced from one monitor computer that had an i5 like fourth generation. That's how I casted Counter-Strike, and on my internet only let me go up to like 1800 bit rate or something like that. So I had to I think in until 2018. Yeah, I think it's until the end of 2018. All of the money I made from casting, I actually made nothing because I just paid producers to stream the games for me. So my casting fees just went to them because I didn't get paid much either back then. MDL was the first time ever where I actually made money from Counter-Strike, and I didn't just spend it onto getting a producer to say, "Hey, dude, can you please stream this for me because I do not have reliable internet. I can't do that." So people then you don't, and you're not making the money, even though technically you're making money, but you're not making the money. I think across 6 years of working in esports now, I'd say maybe 5 if you want to remove the first year where, first year is always whatever, it's volunteer work. I think I've made like 20,000 euros in 5 years. Which is obviously not very much money when you consider it. Even for Pakistan, that's not amazing. And beyond that, it was also that I've also graduated from the best university in my country. There's always a lot of pressure to do other things when you've done that. I'd say that one of the biggest things for me was also that it was trying not to get caught up in they don't want to hire me because I'm brown, which I've been told, but I just don't think it was true even from that guy, because that guy was someone unemployed at a very, very, very big company, and that company hired me later on. But he was also someone who was brown, and he was a person of color, and I honestly feel like he was just a little bit bitter, to be perfectly honest, because I don't think there's endemic racism in esports the same way. There's some issues, but that's just the lay of the land in the world. There were all of these mental barriers that I had to get past as well, which is that the other thing, and I'm sorry if I'm going stream of consciousness over here, but mental barriers like that. Then one other very big thing was, dude, who do I look up to? Everything I did was impossible until I did it. Can you like Skriv? Can you imagine? I'll just ask you this question before I continue on with my answer. I tell you, okay, for 4 years, you're gonna study your ass off to research. You're going to be hated by everyone because your accent is different. So you also have to develop a new accent and give up part of your, not really your identity, but part of, sort of who you were, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with making an accent. People can understand me better. That's okay. And you're going to get paid for it. But all of the money you make, you're paying observers to produce the game for you. So you actually don't get anything except maybe just a little bit towards the end. Okay. There's that. And at the same time, you don't understand anything about rates, etc. So everyone actually sort of dislikes you because they think you're undercutting, even though you just don't understand because the currency is different. You don't know what market rates are. You don't know who to talk to. You don't have anyone. You don't have an esports industry. You don't have anyone to ask. I tell you all of this, and I tell you, and every bit of money you're making, you're giving away. Would you do it?
Yeah, I see. I mean, like, I still would, right? I think
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from. It's kind of that, believing in the process and obviously a passion for the
Of course.
role itself, right?
Of course.
But at the same time,
Absolutely.
there's an awful lot there to overcome, and I'm sure a few times, because I've had it a couple times with things that I've had to deal with, just wanting to maybe indeed with your degree and everything go down a different path that's a little bit easier every now and then, and no offense to people that do, but I wish I had a dream to just work at like a grocery checkout or whatever, you know what I mean, and then that would be very easy to achieve.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not what I want. That's not what I want, and I'm sure that's not what you want either.
It isn't. And the other thing is then the advantage that you have over there is also that, like, frankly speaking, you could look up to people like Richard or Thorin or, people who did fantastic things from counselor states. And, if they can do it, then anyone can. But for me, it's like one thing is that there's also always this guilt of being from a well-off family. But when I think about it now, it's really stupid because you can't afford a computer here if you're not from a well-off family. Like, that's the simple truth of it. To put it into context, even as a graduate from the best university in the country, the money I would make if I graduated, like monthly salary from a good job, from the best job I could possibly get, would be maybe 450 euros a month when I graduated. And when you put aside expenditures and everything, you're looking at a whole year of savings without going out to eat much, without, a whole year of savings to get a good computer that can actually stream. So, you have to some extent, you sort of have to be from a well-off family. But there's always a bit of that guilt in me that, hey, look at people like Thorin, Richard, all these people in the West who do it. But now I realize there were different challenges, and everyone has different challenges, man. I don't want to belittle anyone, but I do still sort of think I am still sort of trying to do it in hard mode, because the other thing is also, Skriv, I mean, I'm sure you had friends in the casting pool coming up as well. Frankly speaking, the other issue that I had was I did it wrong. I came through ESL. I came into a significantly higher level of casting than I should have for Counter-Strike. The first game I ever casted in my life was Astralis versus Dignitas. This was Dignitas with MSL. So this was the Dignitas that later on went to an Epicenter. So Astralis versus Dignitas, the two most tactical teams in the world at that point. That was my first ever match casted. And I don't blame anyone, but if a caster sees me casting that with like 15,000 viewers on my channel and I'm doing an absolute shit job of it, they're gonna resent you for good reason, because you don't deserve it. But I didn't know that at the time. So stuff like this happens. You don't have friends in the casting pool at that point. Stuff like that. And look, that's no one's mistake but mine. Don't get me wrong, but it does make it harder, especially when you can't network as it is, because even if you come to an event, the other thing about me is I don't drink. So it's also like, hey, what's the best way to network? Yeah, go have some beers with the boys. Stuff like that. That's sort of how you get to know people, build camaraderie. It's a Western culture thing. Again, I'm not disparaging it. It is sort of there. And that's not what stopped me at all. None of these are what stopped me. They're just things that did sort of make it seem impossible for a very, very long time. And it was just me being a stubborn asshole, which made me want to continue, because my point was always I've always had this issue, which was like, I will be better. I'm just too competitive. I will be better than you. I'll be better than all of you cunts one day, and then you'll see, and I'm going to show you all the finger. But I think one thing I will say is that I have actively tried to make it easier for people after me in Pakistan and whatnot. I've tried to train people. I've tried to do all that stuff. But I mean, dude, there's so much. I always have a hard time answering this because I get lost in thought, thinking of everything. Yeah. Because I still remember one particular incident. I don't know if you were going to ask me about it, but IEM Katowice 2017 qualifiers were a particularly infamous incident for me, because it was like there were 50,000 people watching my stream. There was a storm outside. My internet had gone to shit. I didn't know how to use my microphone properly back then, because I casted like this back then. So I'm talking like this. So obviously my audio quality is going to be pretty bad because I'm this far away from my microphone. Yeah. So all of this stuff was there. There was a storm. My internet was gone to shit. There was like 60% frame losses. Twitch in general has always been very, very bad to stream to from the Middle East and Pakistan, because we get bad ping to every single Twitch server there is. And the issue with uploading live streams is that if you have bad ping, it doesn't matter even if you have a 1 gigabit per second internet connection. You can't go above a particular bitrate. So I couldn't go above that 2400 bitrate for a 50,000 viewer stream, and that is just dog shit. That is not excusable. No one should have to watch that. And back then, I wasn't getting paid for that, by the way. So because I wasn't getting paid, I couldn't afford to pay an observer. And combine that with the fact that then I'm looking at all of these other casters I won't name because I respect them immensely and I really like them now, but I hated them for what they did, which is all of these other casters in Reddit comments saying, oh, we're so sorry, guys, we couldn't cast this because ESL didn't let us have it. And it was just like, guys, you're really throwing me under the bus over here. But yeah, it was rough. It was a lot of rough moments, and I'm still not through yet. I mean, I still, like, let's be honest, I might still flop and fail, and you might never see me again in 6 months. I don't think so, because I just think I'm better. But yeah, that's really all there is to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got a really good line there in the middle. You know, it was impossible until I did it. I think is a good one. You know, hang on to that. Maybe the title of the
That's the
autobiography.
title.
But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. But no, I mean, there's also a lot in there that obviously, like you say, everyone has their own things that they've got to overcome. But then there are some that you know resonate with me in terms of like working with other people. I've found it not working with them, but you know, forming those relationships and like networking and whatnot. I think it's very, very difficult and very quickly as well. People can, with this being a freelance market based on the internet, you know, people form
Oh my
a whole
god,
persona
dude.
of who you are based off of like
Oh yeah.
5 or 6 tweets or whatever, or based off
Yeah.
of 5 minutes of watching you cast, or you know. So and there's a whole, you talk about rates in there as well. There's a whole thing at like, you know, the tier 2 level that I'm sure we could talk about for a very long time, of like misconceptions, lack of communication between people that just leads to a lot of confusion and problems and whatnot. And I think, you know, there is no book on how to do this. You can learn like technically from other areas. You could bring things in from sports broadcasting. You know, a lot of the like American commentators that are on the come up and whatnot. Lot of baseball, lot of basketball and whatnot that has very, very active commentary. Obviously, I watch football and resent them because the commentary, there's the exciting moments and whatnot, but in the downtimes they just say the names of the players and a little bit of history and stuff like that. Yeah,
Pass over
exactly.
to the left side. He's been with the team for 30 years. Oh.
Yeah. But all the same, when it comes to more like that behind the scenes and moving forwards and actually like getting the work itself, I think there's not a guide. There's not, you know, and some people obviously that, you know, you and I have maybe worked with and whatnot have managed to find like mentors or managed to really work the system well. And very quickly get higher up and stuff like that. But for others, it can be quite hard to find that system themselves without the guidance, I suppose.
Oh, actually, just remind me of one or two more grievances. One of which is the most tilting thing that has ever happened to me in my life. I got called to do a studio event in Europe, and the company just said to me a week ago, "Yeah, I can just pop right over." The issue is people do not understand visas. Like, it takes a Pakistani 30 to 45 days to get a visa, especially if it's a business visa to come to another country to work an event. Even if you're not getting paid like a worker's visa, if you're going on an exhibition type visa, you still have to get one, and it still takes you 30 to 40 days. And no one hires you 30 to 40 days before an event. Yeah. No one gives you that time. So it's like, look, if you're European, what's the worst that can happen? Oh, what, I have to drop this other thing, but you have the choice. I've been asked to do lands once or twice, studio events, sorry, not lands, once or twice, not too many times. Every time it's a week in advance, and it's just not possible. Even Blair, who's from India, who has a hard time with visas, even he has a better time with visas than I do. People do not understand how difficult it is, and considering. And I think most of the time, by the way, if not for Corona, I would not have gotten DreamHack. I can guarantee that. I wouldn't have gotten it. Maybe Robin would have reached out to me and asked me. I don't think they would have done it in time for me to get a visa, though. I just don't think it's possible for them to have done that. So I actually got a little bit lucky, to be perfectly honest. 2020 was horrible. It sounds horrible saying that, but I got lucky because of the lockdown that I got a chance to ignore the visa complication BS. So I got a chance to prove myself. So that's where I'm hoping to springboard off of. Don't get me wrong, but if not for 2020, there would have been a chance that it would take me another year and a half, maybe 2 years, to get to a point where it's even the norm for tournament organizers to care enough about you to say, hey, 45 days before, go get yourself a visa, son. Especially because most of the time, Skriv, and I'm sure you know this, if we get hired for something, we're filled. We get hired because someone else dropped out, because someone else couldn't do it, because the negotiations fell through with someone. There isn't time. And that's how it is for lower tier talent.
Yeah, I can. I mean, we'll see where it goes. I would imagine it's not going to be too difficult after Brexit, but I'm still going to have to, deal with it. But yeah, the it's definitely a solid case that you make about last minute and stepping in as replacement kind of thing. To go to an actual event is very difficult indeed. Doing your online stuff, it's certainly doable, but and
Yeah.
it's something. I mean, what we've had. The pay issues, right? They seem to have been sorted by a nice little, uproar from some of the higher tier talent. And praise be to Vince for taking the first step. And then of course now it's more that kind of freelance energy of not knowing sometimes what's on the horizon or how much work, or do I need to preemptively book myself off for this or whatever. I suppose maybe at like our kind of level is there like part-time stuff that comes in.
Yeah.
But I think maybe our next step as talent would be getting some kind of contract that says, okay, you're going to work this event, and this event. At the moment, as it stands, things are subject to change, but just to give a bit more of an idea that it's like, okay, I can actually schedule this time for work for an event, and not have to worry about things.
No, for sure, dude. It's especially rough at our level, I think. I'll cite a friend of ours, Keith LaFortune. I'm sure he'll be perfectly fine with me saying this. Is that he's had periods where, look, dude, casting it's rough. Even if you don't get paid that much, and you don't know when you're going to be paid. So sure, maybe you're getting paid 3,000 euros in 1 month, and then for 4 months you've got nothing. So for people like us, it's really important for us to also kind of know when to find part-time work. And now that's one advantage I'll say I have from being from Pakistan, is that, look, man, even if I don't make that much money, it's better than what I'd make normally. So at the very least, I don't have to care about that. So I can full-time properly. I live with my parents. My parents are very supportive. Living with your parents over here isn't considered like a loser thing, which is one of the stupidest things, in my opinion, about the West. Is like, why would living with your parents be considered a loser thing to do? Fuck off. But yeah, sorry, it's just this does not make sense to me at all.
Yeah, I get you. It's shifting a bit. Because getting a mortgage and no one owns a house anymore. So
So anyhow, but like people in the West, so casters in the West, I feel for them. Like, how do you know if you're 25 years old, okay, which is young, but it's not young and that young, It's young, but it's at a point where you're supposed to have started to get some of your life in order. If you're 25 years old, you don't know when your next paycheck is. You know that across the year you'll probably learn enough to make like a minimum wage, or maybe a little bit better, but you don't know when it's coming. Do I get a job and put myself back as a caster? Or do I keep hounding ESL, DreamHack, Blast, Flashpoint? I'm going to say all the tournament org days so I don't offend anyone. Do I keep hounding them? Guys, could I please know what dates I'm employed for? Could I please know this? It's not easy. It just isn't.
There's a lot of stress involved, and you mentioned some of the bigger ones and whatnot there. It's like
the smaller ones are even worse, yeah.
Well, I think it's like with the bigger ones, trying to break in is the difficulty, and then sometimes it is just things, and there's an awful lot of it at the moment where it's like, what reason do they really have to hire you over someone else? Like you say, it's stepping in as a replacement is generally where it goes, and even then, if you do a good job, you're not necessarily guaranteed, and it's very difficult to know, and as well, when you try and reach out, when you try and get your way in, you don't know whether it's going to go somewhere. When you get that reply that's like, oh, we'll let you know if any opportunities come up. It's like, well, will you? You know what I mean? It's like,
just say no,
because you kind of,
please?
yeah, you kind of understand why they're doing it, because it is like that nice way. But I think I'm in a similar boat to you, where it's like, okay, we think you're good at these things. You're not so good at these things. Maybe here's some reasons why, we don't want to hire you at this current time. And then there's some goals. There's some other things that you can go and change there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess that can be difficult. I think I mentioned to you before the broadcast, I have talked about it on previous interviews as well. There was a little conversation on By the Numbers where it's like, even Thorin trying to get Maui Snake out there ahead of time was very difficult. And then opportunities given at Epicenter, opportunities given at Flashpoint 1 have really springboarded Maui Snake to get hired by other.
Like, I'd like to believe that Maui
scene.
got all that attention because of all the casting jobs that I found us. Because Maui, you never looked for casting gigs. It was always me, Maui. No, I'm joking. No, Maui's great. I have nothing but good things to say about him.
Yeah, well, I suppose in that sense, probably an awful lot of experience for him, right? From what you guys did together when it comes to presenting and having character.
I would take no credit for Maui's success at all. There's a lot of people who maybe I can take credit for, maybe they got a little bit better, this and that,
Yeah.
Maui, no, dude, no. Maui was tier 1 from the beginning. He just didn't know it yet.
Yeah, well, fair. But yeah, so there's all these issues with like breaking into that next level, that higher level, and obviously it can be done. Flashpoint is a really good place at the moment. It looks like, with Alan getting in, who, as far as I'm aware, obviously Noticed by Thorin, has a great mind for the game, has worked as a coach and whatnot. But in terms of, broadcast
that was his first event,
experience, right? Exactly. Definitely 100% at that level. He may well have done some stuff, because I am remembering off the top of my head here, I think he was the coach for like the Warwick Esports Society.
Yeah.
And they won like 3 seasons in a row or whatever, right?
No, Alan was really good. Like, I actually wanted to do a show with Alan. I don't know if you've seen my talk show, which was the Hired Talent show, which unfortunately we could, because we were 3 different time zones, the predominant. It was actually supposed to be myself, Phoebe, and Alan initially, because Phoebe and Alan had a great dynamic. Phoebe is Dualism97 on Twitter, in case you guys don't know. She is a former esports journalist, now social media for G2. And Alan was supposed to be the role that Maui occupied, but we just could never figure out like timings and all that stuff. And Alan was like, sort of busy and everything. And I already had a great dynamic with Maui and a great rapport with him, so we'd end up working on that regards instead. But yeah.
Yeah, so I really like Talon. At the moment, he's pumping out the content, which is maybe something we can touch on as well, because obviously Hawker Noticed by Thorin and picked up for Flashpoint. I've always thought he's been very, very good as a commentator, for sure. Yeah. Like, even when, I was first started, he was one of the people that, when I started working with him and other people in and around the same kind of tournaments, he always stood out to me. And I'm not just saying that, because hopefully he's on Flashpoint or whatever.
Skriv on Flashpoint.
But no, he's always kind of stood out to me. And then obviously, this content drive that he's been on, I would say, I think he started that maybe like a few months after I first started working with him. So it was fairly early on in his career. Has really turned things around, has really, I think, changed things for him. Because yes, he is very good at what he does, but then there is also that, as we've mentioned, what reason do they have? And also, how do you draw attention to yourself? And for someone like Thorin, who makes an awful lot of content, I think there's some clear. That's how he first met Maui Snake. That's how he first met Alan. One would assume,
I don't know. I'm not sure if that's how he met Maui, actually, because I know Maui and Max Millet were 2 applicants towards Thorin's research assistant program. So Max Millet was, funnily enough, both people I've casted with. Max Millet was fantastic co-caster as well. Very much in the vein of Maui. If he wasn't living in Australia, he would have been one of the better analysts as well. But I think he quit CSGO stuff. So I'm not sure if Thorin discovered him through his content, but he definitely verified him through his content. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. But either way, it's helped these people like massively, and I think it's something that other commentators are starting to realize. Obviously, projecting a little bit here, but there's a few others as well at like our kind of level that have started pushing content out there, whether it's analytical and whatnot. I don't know. I mean, what are some of your opinions like when it comes to content? Specifically, I think what I'll ask here is more so from that play-by-play side of things, because I think it, in a way, although making the content itself can be challenging and time-consuming and all that kind of stuff, I think if you're more of a color or an analyst, you have a bit of an easier time deciding what to make, right? You just jump in, you make some analysis content on something that you saw on a broadcast the other day that you thought was really cool, or an idea that you've had. But when it comes to doing play-by-play stuff, I think beyond like interviews and podcasts, which I guess are slightly different, you know, like interviews more one-on-one, podcasts can have like more people and are a bit more laid back, obviously. But I don't know, do you think there's anything like beyond that for play-by-plays that maybe they could get into?
So I got noticed because of my content as well. I'll just repeat that in case the video doesn't pick it up properly. I got noticed because of my content as well, actually. That's why I had a reasonable 2020. The way I got noticed was I did an interview with Hunden, and I published that on GG Recon. And Frankie, while she was doing some research for an event, stumbled across it, and she thought it was a good interview. And you know, Frankie has been a huge help to me. Frankie's been really, really helpful. So Frankie really helped me out with stuff like show reels and like how to contact people. You know, Frankie's, I think, the first ever, I wouldn't say mentor because we don't do the same thing, but she's been the first person who's like helped me in esports ever. So that was really, really, really nice of her. And I will add, I was writing for a year and a half at that point as well. I haven't written in 2020. Actually, I haven't written in 2020 after March or so because I was just working a lot more. Yeah. But I think I wrote 150 pieces in total or something in a year and a half. What the fuck am I saying? Sorry, not 150. Like 90 pieces in a year and a half, which was a lot for me because a lot of those was also like interviews and things like that, and you know, very long narrative features and you know, stuff around that. The thing is, Skriv, I'll be honest, and please do not feel insulted by anything I say over here. I think it's anyone can do it, content. And even for analysis, it's a lot more difficult than maybe you'd think because, frankly speaking, all of Hawkeye's analysis, I look at it and I'm like, I could genuinely just do this. Like, I do understand the game on a deep enough level to do that, but I don't think of it. And that's sort of the difference maker. Like, I have a lot of very cool concepts in my head that I want to do for content, but I'll be perfectly honest, I just do not enjoy the filming process. And that's a very, very, very big issue for me, which is that I preferred writing to filming because I don't like I'm fine with getting on a camera and talking and filming that. I'm fine with all. I do not like having to edit gameplay. I don't like having to go through and record parts out of demos because of how shit our demo viewer is, even now. It's just very, very tedious. And that is, honestly, that's the one regret I'd say I have. I didn't develop that habit more. And I will try to do that moving forward. But there's definitely content that play-by-plays can do as well. And the other point is, dude, if you can't do play-by-play content, just do an analytical content or just do showcase content about, like, I don't know, maybe a lower tier player or something like that. The point is, make it something that interests you, make it something that is interesting. Like, interviews are always good because they're a solid place to be. And in my opinion, the way I approached it with my content was interviews were kind of my burger in my restaurant. And again, this is where my education helped me, is that I have a degree in business administration and we learned about, you know, a few marketing point. Interviews for me were always a burger. People will come and they'll subscribe for the interviews, but then they'll watch the appetizers, a few other things. They'll watch my other content. Or they'll read my other content, more importantly. So, like, for example, I think to this date, the piece I'm most proud of is I wrote a piece called Device, the Gatekeeper to the Gods. And as a play-by-play, I just kind of talked about the history of how Device has never been a god of Counter-Strike, because he hasn't. You know, he hasn't been Simple, Shock, Zabu, Nico, all these people, but he's always been that gatekeeper, that final boss. And if you want to get to the godhood, you have to get past. And that's been true forever. And I don't think enough people talk about it. And I really wish that nickname would have stuck because it's a cool ass nickname. You know, I think it's perfect for Device. It's perfect for even Astralis. That, you know, they are literally the gatekeeper to the gods. You know, they gatekeep championships from Simple and Zaiwu. They gatekeep, you know, the godhood itself for players like that. And I made this, you know, really nice long feature article, which was like, I don't know, like 1,500, 2,000 words long or something. One issue I always had was actually people wouldn't let me write my beastly 3,000 word articles. I was always sad about that because I really like my 3,000 word articles. It's just more fun writing like that because I have a huge reading and writing in fantasy background. So I was always anyway. My point is, if you're a player and you think you can't make content, you haven't thought about it enough. To be perfectly honest, I could, for example, I'm fine with naming one of my ideas, which I never got around doing. I wanted to do content pieces on, hey, this is like a player, and this is why I think he could be up and coming, and just talk about like the results he's had and why those results are impressive while you're casting him. Like I've wanted to do a piece on Shiro for a year now on why I think he's overrated. That would be a hell of a piece. But unfortunately, I hate filming gameplay to the point where I was just like, well, I'm casting all the time, that sort of work as well. And I've got,
Yeah.
and I was also starting my own company, which failed and whatnot. And, there was a lot of work I was doing. So I decided not to do it. And I'll probably get around to it sometime soon. But the point is, things like this, you can still do as a play-by-play. You're still watching fucking 50 games of tier 2 anyway. And if you're underneath that level where you're not watching 50 games of tier 2 and you're not casting them, then you're probably not at a point where you need to care about content, frankly speaking. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting as well, like discovering how to get on the grind and keep it up. I think this is something that for a long time I had thoughts of, and it would be good to and whatnot.
Yeah.
But you just have to like get it started, get going with it. It's so important at the moment as well to just have more avenues. It's a way of growing your skill set as well, right? One of the reasons, obviously, I enjoy people coming on and I enjoy talking to them and having some insights and whatnot, and getting better and better and better at interviewing, because coming up with questions on the fly and all that, it can indeed be very difficult. But I think as well, it's something that you can control, where we've talked about these difficulties of breaking in and getting noticed and little moments that can stick with you and whatever it may be. But when it comes to creating content, like I would like to prove that I can do interviews, that I can perhaps do a bit of hosting stuff in the future, and this is a way of me showing that, because breaking in as a commentator is going to be difficult. Getting the opportunity to host some stuff regularly at a good level is going to be very difficult because I have no tangible experience within that. You know what I mean? So I think getting on with it is really important, and it's becoming more and more and more important. But certainly, like, one of the things that I've definitely struggled with, and I suppose taking your advice on board personally as well, but just coming up with other things. I'm trying to think like what more can I make. But for me, it's like this: doing an interview, production wise, very very simple. Editing wise, very very simple. Coming up with like a short form video that maybe highlights a player, indeed, like you say, it is like watching and recording. But then for me, it's more the editing process. I have a lot of learning to do there. You know what I mean? So there's always obstacles and whatnot in the way when it comes to like getting started and getting the early portions. But I suppose once you get into a flow and once you have some supporters behind it and you keep at it, it's just going to keep on growing. I'm very very curious to see where the likes of Hawker, where the likes of Alan, who is absolutely pumping the videos out at the moment. He's on like 2 or 3 solid original ideas a week. But then also I'd really like to have a conversation with Thorin about how he does it. There's so much content that he pumps out, as well as I suppose at the moment there's not as much going on. So
back in the day, you used to do one a day. The thing that's important to remember at Thorin, though, Skriv, which is something that I tell myself as well, is Thorin's old, and in my opinion, one major disadvantage that, for example, Dinko and Honka have over people like myself and Michael is that even just a couple of years difference of age makes a difference in how, especially at these crucial times, in how many experiences you've had, in what kind of people you've talked to and whatnot. So, for example, one place where I've always had an advantage is that, dude, I've done national television hosting. It did fuck all for me in my esports, but I've had that experience. I've talked to a lot of different people and seen how they do it. I've also done stand-up comedy for about a year before the pandemic hit as well, and that also gives you a lot more connection to people, a lot more experiences. I read a lot more experiences. In my opinion, when you've maximized your experiences to the degree where Thorin has in a lot of different ways, and I'm not going to discredit him. Everything he's done is amazing. I'm just kind of explaining why I feel a little bit less bad about it. I guess even though at this point, honestly, I don't compare because he is a legend and he is, a goat in many senses for esports. But um, the ability to conceptualize new ideas and concepts is generally derived from other fields of life in esports because esports is very underdeveloped. So, for example, a lot of my content pieces that I have in mind aren't from esports. They do not exist in esports, but they exist elsewhere, or they're an idea I got from reading about something, or an idea I got from watching something, or something like that. And I want to see how I can kind of shoehorn that into esports. So, in my opinion, like people like that, and people like Richard, for example, who Richard is very entertaining in his streams and everything. And one of the reasons for that is, dude, the guy's had a fucking crazy life. Like okay, I think I've had some moments in my life that are pretty crazy. Like, there's been some pretty insane shit. Like, a bomb blew up behind my school and everything. Stuff like that's happened to me. I do not have the stories he does. you know, so the in my opinion, with age, if you have traveled your journey effectively, and you have done so consciously. This is one very important thing, that when you're going through whatever emotions you're going through, you're consciously trying to rationalize and find logic and find philosophy and find meaning or lack of meaning even in what you're doing. Then that translates through into your content much more effectively, if that sort of makes sense. If you are able to, if you're already at that level. I'm not saying it makes it easier. I'm just saying it gives you more ideas. That's all. So yeah, Thorin's old. That's your headline for this video. TeaTime says Thorin is old.
The out of context clip that I can play at the start. But yeah, I mean, I think at one point as well he was making like philosophy content on a separate channel and whatnot. So I'm not sure if he still does that actually. I remember watching it when it like initially came out. Okay, fair. So moving on, I think this is going to be our final question of this section. What are some of the long-term goals that you have within casting, and then perhaps onwards, seeing the Henry G, the Moses shift, maybe a move, something a bit akin to Joe Miller, who moved into like more of a broadcasting management role. What kind of things do you have, like, or if anything, planned out in your head?
No, not really, honestly, because the thing is, for me, it's more about next 2-3 years. What can I break in? And outside of that, the thing about esports is it's too unsure for me. I think it's kind of dumb to plan for 5 years or you're like, oh my god, I want to do this. Like, there's stuff I'd like to try. I'd love to try being a GM for a new team, like for like FPX. Oh my god, I'd love being a GM for FPX. The one they were assembling their team. Even Extra Salt, the American organization, I'd love to have been a GM for a team that doesn't have baller money, because I think I could do a lot over there in a few years. Not right now necessarily, but in a few years at least. I wouldn't mind coaching. But the thing is, esports is too unsure. I eventually want to do a PhD in economic policy and theory for a particular thing for my country, because there are some places where I'd like to help out the country, also in some ways at some point I would like to bring esports into my country properly. I tried it last in 2020. It didn't work out because of a few reasons. I wish it would have. Pakistan has this very vibrant Counter-Strike community in particular. Uh, we could really, really make a dent globally, but for a lot of reasons, it hasn't happened so far, and I unfortunately was not in a position to overcome those this year when I tried. It was a little, but honestly, I don't think about it that way. About like, oh, in 5 years, maybe it's too early. It's just too early. We haven't broken into tier one yet. We haven't broken into knowing we're gonna get invited to, let's say, I think my ideal is I need to know I'm going to be invited to at least 80 show days a year where I'm getting paid a reasonable rate, uh, where I can start thinking about, okay, now I can actually think about 5 years into the future for esports. I don't know. That's really all my answer. And anyone who tells you they know, they'll change their mind in a year. And I have goals, I have personal milestones, but they're not the same thing as being like, hey, one day I want to be a GM, or I'm going to do this and this and this. And I'm like, sidestepping. It's a lot more about understanding, like I said before, a lot of my personal journey right now is understanding why I'm doing this, understanding what motivates me, understanding why do I give a shit about casting a video game so much. Why do I like that so much? And then can I keep doing it? One thing that I've thought about a lot is when do I give up if I don't make it? If I hadn't, my cutoff was middle of 2021 to get to a DreamHack. I made that, fortunately, but feasibly in half a year, if I hadn't made that, I would have had to reconcile myself with, hey, do I quit casting? There's all of, I'm not at a point where I can think that long term, in my opinion, and I think it's silly too.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit of difference there, like for me, because I have like a fairly, not like solid, not I am going to do these things, but a bit more of like a path of where to go, what kind of, like you say, goals, maybe a few cut-off points by the time that I want to be on certain broadcasts or whatever it may be. But then I kind of have ideas of like what to do afterwards, where to go, what kind of role to maybe make a shift into. But then it does depend, right? Because we don't quite know. One of the things I suppose that starts a slowdown for like the older talent and whatnot is some of that consistency that we talked about, but then also the amount of traveling. You're going to get a family and settle down. Is that something that you want to do? Or you can't be on the opposite side of the world all the time? But is that something that sticks around? Will we eventually just be in one solid studio in CS with maybe not all the games, but enough games? If I get a good gig with ESL for 8 months of the year, in at least a solid studio location for a couple months, maybe they move it throughout the year, but not quite as drastically as we've seen with some of the calendars. I think 2019 was crazy busy and crazy moving around, particularly in that final like 3 months of the year or whatever. It was a bit mental. But all the same, I think it's kind of intriguing to see like how people space things out a bit differently across the board and have like different ideas of what they want to do and when they want to do them by.
So the thing is, for me, in my experience, and this is my experience from writing. So I don't like, I wouldn't say you might not share the experience, obviously, but when I think too much about the goal, like a very far off goal, I believe in milestones and mile markers, and I believe in all of that. But when I thought too much about, oh my god, I'm gonna like when I was writing my book, which I never finished because I'm fucking dog shit, but but it was always just like I was always thinking about, when I ended this, I'll edit it, this is this process, and these are all these little milestone markers, and I got so obsessed with them that I couldn't actually like work. And for me, that happened for a while in casting too, where I was so obsessed with, hey, I've got to get to a LAN, I've got to get to this point, that I forgot that it's not about that. It's about getting to be the best.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I will say, I will be the best. I will either be the best or I'll have quit before, or I'll have quit midway. There will be no, like, if given the opportunities, there will be no one in the history of esports who would be able to compete with me. That I can say with full certainty. But that's assuming I get past the initial barrier. And right now, I don't care about what happens afterwards until I do get past the initial barrier, because there's a lot of issues there. And look, man, a lot of people can, I'm sure there's people who think they could be the best of all time. I don't know if you do, maybe you do too. I am more than happy to vocalize it by saying there will be no one better than me. And, that's all there is.
Well, there you go. There you go. I like it. I like it. See, and again, that's another thing. I've always thought that, like, I'd want to be one of the best in that conversation, in that debate, but whether I'd make it to being, like, number one, best of...
Who do you think is the best caster of CS ever?
I think, as it stands at the moment, I'd probably say...
No. Of all time.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
Let me... I would say...
Oh, sorry. Up to now, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, I would say Sadakist, but given time and perhaps, like, a major and a final and whatnot, I'd probably say that Scrawny has the potential, yeah.
But that's my point, though. You don't have to think about it. For you, it's Sadakist right now.
Yeah.
It's... And even for me, it's not even about having someone tell me, oh, yeah, you're the best. I don't really care about that. It's about... it's just
personal,
about the
personal goals.
No. It's just the pursuit. Like, it's pointless to me to not aim for that. It's just about it's pointless for me to not believe in that. Because for me, it's just about the pursuit of excellence. And I'm fine with failing. That's the thing. I'm fine with being wrong. But my belief has to be there that I will be the best. Now, do I think I'll fail? Maybe. You never know. I failed before in things I thought I would be very good at, like being a Dota pro. I thought I'd go ahead and be the first ever Pakistani to be an actual Dota pro. But one thing I'll say is that, looking back to it, my aspirations and a lot of things I did was, I always thought I was aiming too low. Like, when I tried being a Dota pro, I was aiming for tier 3. It was like, hey, I'll get a tier 3 and I'll get to tier 2. It was never about... And because of that, so I'll give an example, and I'll try to bring it down in terms where you can get in league as well, which is that as a support player, because I always played position 5, I would sometimes let myself let slip a few last hits. I remember this. This was a bad happen. Again, this was when people were not as mechanically skilled. Now I suck and I still don't do that now. But the point is, I would let that happen, and I always think, yeah, who gives a shit? We'll win anyway. And that wasn't the point. The point was not to win anyway. The point was never even to win. The point was to be better. The point was to be the best in that capacity. And had I known that I'd be the best, had I believed in that, I might have... look, honestly, I would have still probably failed, because mechanically, I just didn't have it in me to play it. But I might have been tier 3 then. That's the difference. It's sort of like how in League of Legends, North American League of Legends, and again, I know this from talk shows, I don't actually watch the game. But in North American League of Legends, it's like, Core JJ, former world champion, is still world-class support in North America. He is still practically untouchable. Even when he went to Worlds, he could have been one of the best supports at Worlds, maybe even top 2, top 3, from what I understand from talk shows. But you don't do that if your only goal is winning NALCS. We've seen that from TSM so many times over. If your only goal predominantly is winning NALCS, you won't ever move forward. And it's hard for me to give a proper comparison, but it's always just like, there's other places where I failed because I didn't do that. So, for example, in university, again, very simple example, just to try and explain my thought process, is that in the first 2 years of university, my GPA wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. It was between 3 and 3.5 ish. For you, that's like a 2-1. And again, grades don't matter. dear God, I hope I don't sound like I'm trying to flex grades or something, because I don't think they matter that much. But just as a life principle, it's more like. But then in the last few years, I sort of realized that why go for less when it takes the same amount of effort to go for more? Because realistically, for you and me, Skriv, is the effort going to be any different for you to be, oh, I'm sort of in tier one, I'm kind of tier one, Is their effort different for you then compared to I have to be the greatest? The
Yeah,
effort is not different. The accountability is different. Because it's easier to let yourself make mistakes and not hold yourself accountable for that. And to some extent, that's good for your mental health. And that's one thing where I don't know how, but I've lucked out into balancing it a little bit somehow, because I love my parents. My parents are really supportive. They really, 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 really helped me in this, which is that I will hold myself accountable for my mistakes, but I won't like get depressed over them anymore. I used to do that, but I won't get depressed over them anymore. So for me, the sense of accountability, personal accountability I have for progress is greatly heightened when I know I'm going to be the best. And the only way I'm not the best is if I shot my own foot in the process. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think for me it's like I understand where you're coming from, right? And I suppose there's a bit of crosswires in the sense that, well, maybe you do, like in that you thought in like all of esports kind of thing, but it seems you're more on the angle of CS.
No, all of esports.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah. I'm a bit better than Monty was.
For me, if we're getting deep into a little bit of psychology and stuff and the philosophy behind it, it's something that I've kind of battled with in a lot of different areas. I'm very, very confident and very, very internally confident, right? And sure of, like, because I think there is a difference, that like external bravado, and then just knowing that you're sort of on the right path, and also having the confidence to, like you say, recognize your mistakes and know why you did them, how to avoid them in future, and the consequences of them and things like that. One of the difficulties with me with something like that is sort of vocalizing it, I think, is to such an extreme extent, is that I've always struggled with like a fear of failure, I think, right? And that's definitely not something that's exclusive, but then the way that I compensate, the way that I deal with that, is by kind of removing a little bit of effort. So I'm not at 100% effort, if that makes sense. It's something that, on my degree, for example, or in education in general, I passed my 11 plus in the UK, which is like an IQ test and everything, and gets you into, presumably, I mean, I have a lot of reservations about it, but presumably a school that is a better level of education than the others in the area, because you're in a pool with people who are also of a higher IQ, right? But I don't know, it was, we'll not get into it too much, but either way, the way that I have dealt with it is, like I say, by not putting like that full amount of effort in, because then it's like, if I don't do as well as other people, or I don't do as well as I would have liked, not to say that I necessarily failed, but I didn't realize my fullest of potential, and then I get to use the excuse of, well, I know self-consciously that I didn't give it my all, that I didn't put everything in, and that's something with casting that I've really had to, and still have to a little bit, but I think I definitely have gotten better with it, of overcoming it, because I want this very, very badly. You know what I mean? I'm not so bothered about my chemistry GCSE, but when it comes to being an esports commentator, perhaps being an esports host in the future, this is something that I want quite a lot. But I still would struggle, I think, to fully vocalize being number one. I think there's potential at some point, right? Maybe I'll win an award or whatever. But I honestly think as well, by the time that you and I get to a point where we could be involved in that conversation, there's just going to be too many to debate with, others that have come and gone or are perhaps still around but not quite as good as they used to be or as popular as they used to be or whatever, that to other people, I don't think that we could be like objectively, to some maybe, but for the most part, could we be objectively named as number one? Now, when it comes to personally and internally and in terms of ability and whatnot, I think so, definitely. Like, I could think to myself that my ability and the way that I approach things and my philosophy behind commentary or whatever role I end up in, I definitely could be number one in my eyes. But I think perhaps I'm a bit more jaded in the sense that I don't think other people will see it that way. And there are outside factors, that that affect it. That's just the way of life. TeaTime has a sharper jaw than I do, so people like him better or whatever. Those are also things that are obviously.
I'm getting some pounds, so
I mean, we're all locked away, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting conversation, right, about like that internal confidence and whatnot. But I don't know. I think maybe I like to set myself up a bit better for worst case scenario, just in case it does happen, or not even worst case scenario, but just the fact that I don't make it to best case scenario, because then it comes as less of a surprise and it's easier to deal with if I don't make it to 100%. If I get like 95% of the way there, I'm happy with that. But maybe indeed I should strive.
I mean, it's a personal thing, honestly. It is a personal thing because now, like, I think a great example for me is Perks in League of Legends, where Perks, I think in an interview in 2016, he said that I will be the greatest player of all time. And then he stopped for a second. You could see he's thinking that maybe except Faker. He says that. And even then, people ragged on him, they shat on him so much when he failed out of Worlds, because G2 didn't do well at Worlds. But now you look at Perks, he's undoubtedly one of the two people in conversation for Western greatest of all time, and he could go on to do even more. He's still godlike talent from the West, and Perks and Caps were the two players who've really made the West relevant in conversations of maybe they can win a world championship. The point over here is, for me, it's a lot of it is also that, Skriv, I'm saying it over here, I'll tell you right now, I plan on casting a couple of major finals if I get to that point, and then I'll go over and I'll cast a TI final. I'm fine with saying it because the point is I want people to make fun of me if I don't do it. I want people to say, that cocky cunt, he didn't, like, look at him, he's failing. Because my fear of failure is a bigger motivator in that regards to push me onwards comparatively. Like, I'll give you an example in CS, which is, dude, Squid, when he was much younger, and Squid is someone who I'm friendly with, I am acquainted with. When he was much younger, he was always saying, he was tweeting like ridiculous stuff about self-confidence when he was like tier 4 or something. But credit to him where it's due, he has grinded a lot more. He's become a lot better. He might make it to a very, very high level. You never know. But the point is, there's a lot more self-accountability when you're putting stuff like this out there publicly. And about your point on the fear of failure and holding back effort, I did that. And then I realized a year later, bit more on me, I went to a different university for computer science first, and then I decided not to go for CS, and I went into the university where I graduated from for business administration. The university which I did CS from, dude, I didn't put in my all, and even to this day, I just think back and I think, what the fuck did I do? because it became a habit. One, and B, I still know if I had gone back, because I was a very 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 talented initial levels of programmer. Maybe not later on because I never tried, but initially the first two courses that most people study in computer science are Introduction to Computing and Object Oriented Programming or Computer Programming. And those two courses are where most people struggle really badly. I aced those without like studying. And now I think back to it, and I always think I should have studied more. I should have done more. I should have done more. Even if I was going to leave the university because I didn't want to do computer science anymore, I should have done more. Similarly, now I think back to my current university. One of the reasons why I'm worried about, one of my bigger concerns in life outside of esports is that I don't know if I can do a master's and a PhD in the things I want to, because my overall GPA was a 3.3 or a 3.4. I don't exactly remember. And ideally, you want to have a 3.6 plus for a good university for further studies. Let's say 3 years down the line, I think back, I'm now in a corporate job, or I'm in some other esports job, I'm doing something else. I don't want to think, man, if I'd watched, a couple more demos and I'd understood the game a little bit better, maybe I would have been able to have an additional style in my casting, because who gives a fuck about. So sorry if I'm marginalizing your feelings right now. I'm more internal dialogue coming out, but it's more like, who gives a fuck about, like, saving your internal dignity. Internal dignity is ego of the worst kind. The only time that internal dignity is good is when you are using it to stand up for principles. Other than that, internal dignity holds you back, in my opinion. So I don't know. It's different for everyone. And look, honestly, some people are devastated then if something doesn't work out. That's one thing that's good about me. I feel really bad for a while. I'm really, really sad for a while. I don't get devastated. Like, my life isn't in shambles. It maybe for 2 months, 3 months. There's a lot worse that's happened to me. There's a lot worse that could happen to me other than not making it in casting in esports. I love casting. I know I'm going to be the best as long as I don't shoot myself in the foot, which I might. I've got loaded guns all around me all the time with the way I speak. But there's worse things I can think of, and one of them is definitely regretting it 5 years down the line, put it that way.
Yeah, I totally feel that. And I think maybe, I'm just a little further behind on the journey that you've already gone on with the mindset and whatnot. I definitely say this year, in terms of, the product and whatnot that I've been like putting out as a commentator, I'm feeling the best about it, feeling very, very confident with it, But I don't know. I think in my own mind, I can certainly be like the best version of myself and always pushing towards that. But maybe it's just the way that I am kind of in social circles and whatnot, where it's a weird one, like mentally. I don't necessarily want everyone to like me, but people's perceptions of me and who they believe me to be is quite important to me, if that makes sense. They don't necessarily have to like that, but sending the correct and making sure that they don't have like misconceptions and whatnot about me is kind
really
of important.
That is really important, though, in the sense, like, I think one place where I definitely suffered in my career is I don't care that much about what people think about me beyond people I work with. And I've suffered because of that. Because the thing is, the reason why I developed that hard exterior is because, look, man, esports hiring isn't racist. Guess what is racist? Twitch ad.
Yeah.
So, stuff like that, like, always kind of, I developed a skin that's to take for my own good at times. And look, man, there is a huge degree of fragility inside me as well. I will get devastated on negative feedback as well, but internally, my reaction to that has been kind of to flip the bird at them, and that's hurt me at times really badly. And in particular, the Dota Bulldog incident, which we don't have time to talk about right now. But anyone wants to know, just Google TeaTime Bulldog, and you'll see 17 different clickbait thumbnails. But yeah, look. There's different paths for everyone. There's different models for everyone. Philosophies are different for everyone. That's really all there is to it. You're saying you might be further behind in the journey than I am, mate. You never know. That might just not be our journey. Simply put, everyone has differences. I might not want to be the best. I might not think I'm the best. I could be the best in a year. 6 months ago, I didn't, by the way, because I was like in this position. I know, man, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm bad mindset. Then I'm like, hey, I bounce to and fro. I change my mind sometimes, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, it is a really interesting conversation about drive and at your core, what you want to achieve. Not even just like the philosophy of how to carry out the job, but just in a sense the philosophy of starting it, and what causes you and what your thought process is with getting on the mic, as it were. But look, I think that is going to do it. So we've been going for a fair while here. This is by far my longest interview, and a lot of fun. I think we have a lot to talk about. Obviously, a lot of similar issues, similar paths, kind of in lanes next to each other. Let's say, right, in that kind of sense. So there's a lot to touch on, a lot to talk about, and I really want to thank you for opening up, being honest, and making this a very, very intriguing interview. I think we could keep on going about philosophy, about difficulties and whatnot, but we've got to bring it to a close, at least this section, at some point. But once again, thank you so much, TeaTime, honestly.
No worries, bro. Take care. Thank you for having me.
Lovely stuff. Absolutely lovely stuff. Like I say, some interesting topics all the way through, particularly towards the end there. And I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it while I'm editing these videos and everything. Oh, I really want to keep this going and keep improving and, get loads of videos out there and get some of the other ideas that I have up in here once I figure out technically with the editing and whatnot how to get them down. It is a bit difficult at the moment learning that. I've got work stuff coming. Blah, blah, blah. Excuses. That's all I'm hearing. Excuses. But no more excuses from today. Yeah. I'm gonna learn. And it's gonna be epic. Because I have loads of ideas. And I want to get it going. I got some funnies for the intros. Sure. I got some separate, series, like whole other video ideas. And it's time. You better hit the sub and the bell. Ding ding. Okay? Otherwise you're gonna miss it. That's how it works. Either way, as per usual, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your support, and I'll see you in the next one.